What's up everybody, welcome back. So in today's video we're going to add grenades with path prediction, and this is going to be the end result. So we're going to have to see if we can add everything in today's video, or we may have to split it up in two videos. So as you can see, the longer I hold down the button, the velocity of the grenade changes. So we're going to add that as well, and then we have a nice arc telling us what the path of the grenade is going to be. And if I release the button, he will throw the grenade. So that's what we're going to do today. If you like the series, please consider leaving a like, and if you want to get your hands on the project files, you can become a member of the YouTube channel or become a Patreon, and then you will get access to the premium channels in the Discord, and those will also give you access to some downloads. So with all of that stuff out of the way, let's dive into today's video. So there's a few different things that we have to set up, and let's start with the animation. So if we go to our characters folder and then heroes, mannequin, animations, so we can look for the grenade animations in here. And we actually have an additive animation, and that's the one we're going to use. So we want to open this one, and we're going to add a notify in here. So we're going to use the notify to determine when the grenade is going to throw. And I'm actually going to add it right here. So right before frame 14. Where the hand is completely open. So over here, I'm going to release the grenade. So we're going to add a notify. On the notify track over here, you want to right click and then go to add notify, new notify. And then you can simply enter a name. So I'm going to name this something like a grenade throw. And there we have our notify. So that should take care of the animation. We're going to close this down. And then we want to create a montage. So we're going to right click, create animation montage. So I'm fine with the default name. We're going to keep that one. And then if we open this up, we want to change the slot over here. So we're going to make sure this plays in the same slot as our fire animations. So if we go to the slot name, we want to change it to our attack group and then the upper body attack slot. So this is where we're going to play the animation, or the montage actually. So let's save it and close that one down as well. So that should take care of our animation preparation. And now we want to take care of the inputs. So we're going to add a new input. Let's go to our project settings and then to the inputs. So this is 5.0. I'm going to show how you can add in 5.1 as well. For 5.0, we're simply going to add a new action mapping, and we're going to call this something like a throw grenade. And then I'm going to use the G key on my keyboard. So that should be good to go. If you're using 5.1, so I have a 5.1 project over here. You want to make sure that you add a new input action. So go to your actions folder and then right click. You want to go to input and then create a new input action. So we can call this something like input action throw grenade. And if we open it up, we want to make sure that it's set as a digital bool. So that should be done by default. So we don't really need to change anything in here. And then you want to go to your context mapping, open this one up, and over here you can add a new mapping. So you're going to add one, and then over here select the input action throw grenade that we just created. And then you can set the key you want to use over here. So for example, if I want to use the key on my keyboard, I simply enter it like this. So that's how you can set up your inputs in 5.1. So let me close my 5.1 project. So we have the inputs taken care of as well, and now we need a mesh for the grenade. So I'm going to migrate the mesh from the Lyra game. So I have the Lyra starter game open over here. And then if we go to the weapons folder and go to grenades, this is not the Lyra game. So let me see over here. This is the Lyra game. So we want to go to weapons and then grenade, and grab the mesh over here. So I'm going to right click the static mesh, asset actions, and then migrate it. So it will also grab the materials and the textures. So that should be fine. So let's click OK, and then we're going to make sure we migrate it into our project and select the content folder, and we should be good to go. So we already have this generic material, so I'm just going to say no. Let's say no to all, that's fine. And we have the grenade migrated as well. So let's see if the grenade is actually in our project. So that's working. We have our grenade mesh in here. So we have most of the preparations done and we can start building the blueprint for the grenade. So let's start by creating the blueprint for the grenade. So we're going to right click blueprint class and we want to create an actor. So let's call this our BP grenade and let's set it up. So first of all, we want to add some components and we're going to start with a collision capsule. So let's add a component, look for capsule, and we want a capsule collision. So for this one, I'm going to set the size to be, let me double check. So I'm going to make it a half height 8 and then the width is going to be 4.5. So 8 by 4.5. And we want to make sure that by default the collision is set to none. So we're going to set no collision. And this actually didn't work. So we want to make the half height 8 and that should be better. So I'm going to make the capsule the scene root. So I'm simply going to drag it on here and it will replace the scene root. Then we want to add our grenade mesh. So with the capsule selected, we're going to add a static mesh and that's our grenade mesh. So let's set it up as well, and we can simply select the grenade from our Lyra game that we just migrated, and we want to adjust the position a little bit, so I'm going to set it to -7, and that looks pretty good to me. So for the mesh, we also want to make sure that we have the collision set to no collision, so collision presets, and then no collision for the mesh as well. And the last thing we want to add is a projectile movement component. So let's add another component and look for projectile movement. And to make this work with our prediction, we actually don't want to set too much up in here. So by default, we can make sure that we enable the rotation follows velocity. So let's do that one. And then if we scroll down a little, we also want to enable substepping. So let's click that one. And the last thing we want to do is go to the velocity and make sure that we zero everything out. So all zeros for the velocity, we're going to set this in the blueprint later. So this should be all for the components. Let's compile and save it. And we can start setting up the event graph. So you guys are going to have to bear with me for a little bit. I'm not at my home, so I'm recording from a different setup and I actually miss one monitor. So I have to switch a little bit between my notes and my written notes and my example project. So this is a little bit tedious for me to record and hopefully everything works out. Okay, so we're going to start in the event graph for the grenade. And first of all, on begin play, we want to enable the collision. So why don't we enable it immediately? Sometimes it will get stuck on your capsule component, especially if you're moving forward and throwing a grenade, for example. So what we're going to do over here is add a really small delay, like a 0.1 second. And then we're going to enable the collision for the capsule component. So we're going to drag in the capsule. And then we're going to set collision enabled. And simply make sure that we have physics and query selected, so the lower one, and plug it in. So this is our begin play event. Then we want to create a multicast event so we can set the velocity for the projectile movement component. So we're going to need this multicast later. So let's create a custom event. And this is going to be the multicast set velocity. And we simply want to drag in our projectile movement component and from the component drag off and we're going to set the velocity. So simply grab the variable over here and then we can plug it into the event. So for the event we want to make sure that we set this to a multicast event. So replication multicast, and this should be good to go. Well, and then we want to make sure that we actually do something when our grenades hits something. So first we're going to grab our capsule component. And for the capsule component, we're going to add a hit. So if we scroll down over here, so we have the events and we're going to add an on component hit. So let's click the little plus sign over here. And we want to make sure that this actually generates hit events. So for simulation generates hit events, we want to enable this on the capsule component. So we have the event over here, and this will fire as soon as our grenade hits something. So what we want to do next is grab our, let me check. Okay, no, this is wrong. We're going to grab a branch in here, and we want to make sure that we are the server. So only the server is going to do something, and the clients will just have to listen to what the server has to say. So then we want to grab our projectile movement component, and we're going to stop movement immediately. So select this one, and then we also want to drag off the capsule component again, and we're going to stop simulating. Select that one. So if we look at the stop simulating event, this will make sure that it fires the projectile stop event. So we're going to use this later. So plug it in as well and grab the hit result from the hit event and plug it in into the hit result from the simulation. Then we're going to use the radius damage that comes with Unreal Engine to apply damage. So I haven't actually used the built-in damage system before in this series, but because we're going to use radial damage with fall off, this is actually pretty handy. Everything is pre-set up, so we don't have to mess around with that. So what we can do is simply right click, and then we're going to look for apply damage, and we want to apply radial damage with fall off. So select that one. So we can plug it in over here. Now we can choose to drive all of this through data tables and stuff like that. For now, I'm simply going to set some static values. So for the base damage, I'm going to make it 100. The minimal damage is going to be 15. Then for the origin, we can actually use our hit result. So we can drag off the hit result from the event, and we want to break it. And then we can simply grab the impact point and plug that into the origin. So this is our location. Then for the radius, I'm going to use an inner radius of 150. So everything inside this radius will have maximum damage applied. And then for the outer radius, I'm going to say 350. So from 150 to 350, it will fall off to a damage of 15. And outside of here, there's obviously no damage. So the damage fall off, we want to set it to 1. And we're not going to use a damage class, so that's fine. The ignore actors, we can leave that empty. So for the damage causer, we actually want to plug in ourselves. So the causer is going to be the grenade. And then instigated by controller is going to be our player controller. So for the player controller, we want to make sure that we create the variable. So let me double check over here. So we simply want to drag off. And we're going to promote it to a variable. So we have a simple controller, no player controller or anything class specific. So simply a controller. And let's just call it controller. So we're going to set this variable later if we throw the grenade. So right now this should be go. And then we want to go to our next event, and that's the actual projectile stop event. So for the projectile movement, we can scroll down, and then over here we're going to add our on projectile stop. So because we say stop simulating over here, this will make sure this event fires. So we can grab the hit result from over here again, and we want to break it. Now first of all, to make sure that we actually have our capsule component without collision, we want to drag that one in first, and we're going to set the collision for the capsule component, and we're going to set it to no collision. So after it hits something, we're going to remove the collision. And then we want to spawn emitters and sounds. So let's spawn an emitter at location. And I'm simply going to use the FX from the sci-fi weapon packs. So if you're using Lyra FX, you want to spawn a Niagara system, and this is simply a cascade FX. So I can select the grenade FX in here, grenade explosion. And for the location, we can grab our hit result and plug in our impact point. And for the rotation, we actually want to grab the impact normal. And from this, we want to make a rotator from Z. So make rotator from Z. And then plug that one in. So if you grab it by default and plug it in, it will make a rotator from X. So that's not what you want. This will face the wrong direction. So make sure you grab the rotator from Z and plug that one into the rotation. So that should make our FX work, and then we probably also want to play some kind of sound. So let's drag off here again, and we're going to play a sound at location. Play sound at location. So for the sound, I'm going to use the grenade sound from the sci-fi weapon pack. So that's over here, or it's actually military weapons, but those are the same sounds. So we have our grenade launcher and then cues. And let me see, grenade launcher fire explosion. So we probably want this one. And add it over here. So it's pretty loud, so I'm gonna make it a little bit quieter, 0.75 probably. And again, we can grab the location from the impact point of the hit result. And for the rotation, it doesn't really matter, I think, but we can plug it like this. So we have sounds and FX playing, and the rest we want to do behind an isServer branch. So the sounds and FX need to play for all of the instances, and the rest is going to be handled by the server. So we're going to drag a branch in here, and we're going to check if we are the server, plug it in. And then we want to grab our grenade mesh. And for the grenade mesh, we want to destroy the component. Plug it in over here. Then we're going to wait a little bit because the FX and the sound is playing, and we want to make sure that's finished playing. So we're going to grab a delay and wait for something like 2 seconds maybe. And after that's done, we're simply going to destroy the entire blueprint. So destroy actor and plug that in as well. So this should pretty much be our event graph. We do want to make sure that we go to our class defaults over here, and we want to enable replication. And for the grenade, we also want to make sure that we replicate movement. So if we enable this and we start simulating physics, then this will be replicated to the clients. So make sure replicate movement is enabled as well. Otherwise, the grenade can follow a different path for the client than for the host. So that's the class defaults, and then we also want to go to the grenade mesh, and for the grenade mesh we want to make sure that we have the component replicates over here enabled as well. So with all of those enabled, we can compile and save it, and that should actually be our blueprint for the grenade. So now we can start setting up things in our character. So for our path prediction, we're going to use a spline mesh, and we also want to play some kind of FX where the grenade is going to land. So I used an FX from the Infinity Blade FX pack. So if you go to the marketplace, that's a free pack, but you can choose any FX you like, obviously. So over here we have Infinity Blade FX. You can check out this pack if you like. And then the one I grabbed, let me see. So that's the circle charge up fire phase 2. So if you look for this FX name, you should be able to migrate it. And there's actually quite a lot of FX in the pack. Oh, that's not. Well, you can check it out if you download it, and you can play around with it and choose another FX if you like, but I'm going to use this one. So right click and then asset actions migrate. So it's going to migrate all of the other stuff. That's fine. Let's make sure we migrate it into the correct folder. And select our content folder. And there we go. So we have an FX to play at the landing position, and we're going to use a spline mesh as I mentioned. And for the spline mesh we need a material, so we're going to right click, go to material and create a new one. This is going to be the material spline glow, for example, and open it up. If we actually enter the name correctly, there we go. So I'm going to select the material node over here, and then we want to change the blend mode to additive and change the shading model to be unlit. So additive unlit. And then we want to scroll down, and over here we can actually select used with spline meshes. So you want to enable this one as well, otherwise it's not going to show up. So with those settings in place, we can set up the material, and I'm simply going to add a color. So right click, and I'm going to look for a vector parameter. And we can simply plug in the top pin over here into the emissive color, grab the lower pin and plug it into the opacity. Then we want to open this up. So make sure for the alpha we actually have it set to 1 or anything higher maybe. So we can actually increase this to something like 4 or 5 and it will glow a little bit more. And then I'm going to make it red. So let's select it and make it red. There we go. So this is the material we're going to use for the spline. Let's save it and close it down as well. And with that stuff in place, we can finally start setting up our path prediction. So let's open up our hero base character. And first of all, we want to add a component in here. And we want to add it to our character mesh. So to make sure we can actually add it properly, we need to set up the mesh in here temporarily. So let's select the mesh, and we're going to select our Quinn mesh. So that's in place. With the mesh selected, we're going to add a new component, and that's simply going to be a scene component. So I'm going to call this the grenade location. And then for the parent socket, we want to attach it to our spine 05. So spine 05, select that one. And then we want to give it an offset. So we're going to select the location. And for X, that's going to be 39. For the Y, it's going to be 54.1. And for Z, it's going to be minus 43. And then we're going to grab the rotation and we're going to add 90 rotation in here. So why are we doing this? We need to know the exact location where we're going to throw the grenade before we actually throw it. So we can use that location for our path prediction. And how did I get this location? Well, this is simply the location from the animation that we were playing earlier. So if I would look for the grenade animation, so that's the grenade toss over here. And I simply played this over here. So I set it to the correct frame, and then I added a socket to spine 05 and aligned the socket with the hand so I could see at what offset the socket was. And that offset is the offset we're using over here. So we actually know the precise location where we're going to throw the grenade from before we actually throw it. And we need that for our path prediction. So make sure we have this component in place. And if you use this settings, they will line up with the montage that we selected earlier. So that's the component in place. And then we can start setting up our graph. So as I mentioned before, we're going to use a spline mesh to predict our path, or actually to make our path prediction visible. So let's set that stuff up first, and we actually need quite a bit of room. So let's grab an empty spot on our graph. First, we're going to create the events needed for the path prediction and the spline mesh components. So let's right click, create a new custom event. And the first one is going to be grenade setup trace. So set up trace. And in here, we want to make sure that we have all of the components that we need in place. So we're going to create a spline mesh component first. So let's right click and do add a spline component. So we actually want to add the spline component and not the mesh component. And with this component in place, we can drag off the return value and we can promote it to a variable. So we're going to call this something like a grenade spline and move this over a little bit. So first we want to know if we already have a grenade spline. So we're going to drag in the variable that we just created and we're going to grab an isValid check. So drag off here, isValid, and simply plug it in over here. So if it's valid, we want to destroy it. So we're going to drag off the grenade spline again and destroy component. So hook this one up to the isValid pin. So in this case, we want to start fresh. So we want to make sure that we do not have any old components in place. So then we can grab the isNotValid pin and plug both of them into the add spline component over here. For this node, we want to make sure that we enable the manual attachment and then we can attach it ourselves. So let's disconnect this first. And we're actually going to attach a component to a component. So attach component to component. So attach component to component. And then we want to grab the target as our spline that we just created. And the parent is going to be the grenade location. So that's the scene component that we created earlier. And we're simply going to attach it to that one. So for the location rule, we want to set it to snap to target. And for the rotation rule, we also want to set snap to target. Then we can promote it to a variable. So plug it in over here. We could have done it over here as well. Doesn't really matter, but okay. So we have the variable set. We have it connected. Then we want to check our grenade target. So that's actually where the grenade is going to land, and we want to play our marker fx over there. So we want to add another scene component. Let's right click and do add scene component. Select this one, and from the scene component, the return value we're going to drag off and promote it to a variable. So this is going to be our grenade impact location. And again, first we want to make sure that we don't already have one. So we're going to drag in our grenade impact location and we're going to check if this is valid. Plug it into the previous setter that we already have. So if it's valid, we're going to destroy it. So drag off here again, destroy component, and make sure that we get rid of any old stuff that might be in here. And then we can plug both of these in to the add scene component again. So for scene component, we're also going to enable the manual attachment, but we're not going to do that right away. So we can simply leave that as is, promote it to a variable over here. And then the last thing we want is some fx playing over here. So we want to spawn an emitter attached. Spawn emitter attached. So for the emitter template, I'm going to use the Infinity Blade fx that I just migrated. So that was something with fire, circle fire charge up. So this one, we're going to attach it to our grenade impact target. So the component that we just created over here. So we can simply drag it in, attach the component, plug it in here. Then I want to scale it up a little bit, so I'm going to make it 1.5, so it's a little bit bigger, and for the rest we should be fine. Again, we're going to promote this to a variable, so this is going to be our grenade area of effect fx, so promote to variable, grenade AOE fx. And then we want to make sure that we don't already have it. So again, we're going to grab the grenade AOE fx and we want to make sure that it's not valid. So drag over here is valid. If it's valid, we want to destroy it. So drag off it again and destroy component. And then we can plug in the rest. So if it's not valid, we're going to spawn an emitter immediately. If it's valid, we're going to destroy the old one and then plug everything in. So Okay, so this should be good to go. So if we run this function, we will know that we have everything set up and good to go to start our trace. So the next event that we want to create is our stop trace. So let's right click, create another custom event, and we're going to call this grenade stop trace. So this will simply clean up everything if we do not want to use it anymore, obviously. And for this, we actually need our grenade spline meshes. So what we want to do is we're going to create a variable of spline mesh components, and we're going to use that later. So create a new variable and call this something like grenade spline meshes. Oh, really? Okay, let me rename this grenade spline meshes. There we go. And for the variable type, this is going to be a spline mesh component. Select that one. And we want to turn it into an array. So over here, we have an array of spline mesh components. We're going to drag in this array and we're going to loop through it. So let's grab a for each loop, plug everything in. And we want to get rid of all of them. So we're simply going to drag off the array element and destroy the component. Plug this into the loop body. And then we want to clear our array as well. So we're going to go over here and we're simply going to clear array and plug that one into the completed pin. So make sure you're not continuing behind the loop body because that's going to mess things up. And then we simply want to destroy all of the components that might still be here. So first let's grab our grenade spline, for example. So if we go all the way up to our components, let's grab our grenade spline and we're going to check if it's valid. And if it's valid, we're going to destroy it. So plug it in over here, is valid, destroy component, plug that one in, and if it's not valid, we don't have to do anything. And then we want to do the same thing for our grenade area of effect fx. So let's drag that one in. And we also want to do it for our grenade impact location. So let's drag that one in as well. And then we can duplicate our isValid and destroy component nodes and plug everything in. So this is the grenade AoE FX. Plug this one in, destroy the component if it's valid, and then paste it one more time. Plug in both of the pins over here. Oh, freaking. And then we're going to grab our grenade impact location and make sure that we also destroy that one. So that's the cleanup function for the stop trace. So we have that one done as well. And now we're going to go to the most important one, and that's the actual update trace. So this is the one that will actually create the spline mesh for us. So let's right click, create another custom event, and this is going to be grenade update trace. And then for the update trace, we also want to make sure that we destroy any existing components. So let's grab this for each loop for the grenade spline meshes, and we're going to destroy all of the components. Plug it in over here. And we also want to clear the array, by the way. So let's grab that one as well. Grenade spline meshes, clear array, paste it over here, plug it into the needed pin. So after that, we're going to grab our grenade spline. So the spline component, not the meshes. And from the spline, you want to drag off and we want to clear all the spline points. So make sure that we start fresh again. And after that, we can actually start predicting our grenade. So we have a node for that. You can simply right click and do predict projectile path. And then we want to choose by object type. So select the middle one. And we can plug things in. So for the starting position, we want to grab our grenade location component. So let's drag in the component. And from the component, we can simply get the world location. So that's going to be the starting position. And then for the launch velocity, we actually want to make that a little bit dynamic later. So for now, we're simply going to grab our camera component. And from the camera component, we can get the forward vector. Get forward vector. And we're going to multiply the forward vector. So drag off here and do multiply. So we want to multiply it with an integer. So if we right click, go to integer, it will convert the pin. And for now, let's give it a static value of something like a 750 maybe. You can play around with it, but we're going to change it later anyway. So let's drag off this vector and we're going to add another vector to it. So we also want to give it some upward movement. So we're going to drag off the camera movement again. And this time we want to get the up vector. And for this, again, we want to multiply it. So let's grab this node. And I'm going to multiply it with something like 400 maybe. And add these two vectors together. So this is going to be the launch velocity. So we can plug this in over here. And then let me see. So if we expand this node, we have a few more things we can set. So for the projectile radius, we can simply enter the radius 4.5. So that's the radius of the capsule component we entered in our grenade blueprint. And then for the object types, that's a pretty important one. So this is the kind of objects that the grenade can hit. So if we drag off the object types, we can make an array. And for now, we simply want to use the world static, so that should be good to go. Plug that one in and you're good. For the actors to ignore, let's make ourselves an actor to ignore. So we're going to make an array and then we can drag, we can drag off the array and simply plug in a reference to ourselves. That's good to go as well. So for the draw debug time, this is the length of the simulation. So if the grenade would be flying in the air for longer than this time, it will actually stop simulating before it hits something, for example. So for now, we can set it to something like 4 seconds, 3-4 seconds. You can play around with it a little bit. So obviously you don't want to set it to 10 seconds if the grenade is only going to fly for a few seconds. So depending on the situation, you can mess around with it. And then we have the sim frequency, and that will determine in how many pieces it will be cut up actually, so how smooth the arc is going to be. So the more sim frequency you add, the more demanding it will be on your memory. So be a little cautious with increasing this. So something between 12 and 15 should do fine. I'm gonna say 12 for now. And then the maximum sim time. Oh, I was actually confused. So the draw debug time is the same thing as the draw debug time for a line trace, for example. So that's just, you can see it. The maximum simulation time is what I mentioned previously. So the time the grenade is going to be in the air. So we want to increase it a little bit. Let's set it to 3 seconds. And then over here, you can override the gravity if you want. So we're gonna leave it to 0, so then it's going to use the world gravity. So this will predict the path of our grenade, and then we can use the out path positions over here to create our spline mesh. So from here, we're gonna grab a for each loop, plug it in, and we're gonna plug in the out path positions. And then we're gonna grab our grenade spline. And with the spline over here, we can drag off here and add a spline point at index. So add spline point at index. And we can simply plug everything in. So the loop body, and then the position is the array element. And we can use the array index for the index of the spline point. We do want to make sure that we set the coordinate space to world instead of local. And then we should be good to go. So after this for each loop, we want to add spline mesh components. So we're going to grab a for loop. Not for each, but for this time. because we don't want to add it to the very last points. So we're going to start at the first index, and then we're going to drag off the out path positions again. And from here, we want to get the last index. Let me see. So you don't want to type last, you just want to get last index. Okay. And from the last index, we want to subtract 1. So subtract 1. And that's going to be our last index for the for loop. Plug that one in. And then we can add a Spline Mesh component. So we want to connect it to the completed pin of the for each loop. And then we're going to drag off the loop body and add a Spline Mesh component. So this time we're going to select the mesh component. Again, we're going to enable manual attachment over here. And first of all, let's add it to our array. So we're going to drag in our array of Spline Mesh components. So that way we'll be able to access it later. So we can simply add it in here, plug everything in. After we did that, we want to set a start and an end point. So we can, let me see, we can drag off our array. So we're not using a for each loop, so we have to use the reference of the array over here. We simply want to drag off it, and we're going to get a copy. So we want to get a copy of the for loop index, and then from this we want to drag off, and we want to set the start and end. Let me see. The spline, oh freaking really. So obviously we want to drag off the Spline Mesh component over here. I'm sorry. And for that one, we want to set the start and end. And then we can use the information from the array. So that's why we need the get node here. So we want to start at the array index that we have over here. So we're going to plug that one into the starting position. And then for the end, we actually want to get one index up. So we're going to drag off the array again, and we're going to get a copy. And this time we want to get a copy of the index plus 1. So drag off the index, add 1 to it, plug that one into the second getter, and that's going to be end position. And then we can grab our grenade spline. So that's the component that we created earlier. So in this for each loop. So let's just copy it from here. And we can actually get the tangents that we need to enter over here. So if we do get tangent at spline point, this one, and then we can grab the index again from the for loop, so the point index, and the coordinate space is going to be world, and plug this one into the starting tangent. And we can do the same thing for the ending one, so copy and paste it, and this time we want to grab the index plus 1. Again, make sure coordinate space is world, and plug this one in ending tangent. And that should take care of the start and end position. And then we can also set the scale. So by default, it's going to be a really beefy mesh, and I want to make it a little bit more sleek. So I'm going to drag off the spline mesh and say set starting scale or start scale. Plug it in over here, and we can simply make a vector 2D, for example. So make vector 2D, and we want to shrink it down quite a bit actually, so I'm going to make it 0.04 and then 0.04 again, and do the same thing for the ending scale. So drag over here again and set the end scale, plug it in, and we can plug in the vector 2D here as well. So this will take care of the for loop, and this will actually create the arcing mesh for us. So we want to select our spline mesh component over here and make sure that we actually have a mesh in place. So we can use the default mesh from the starting content. Let me see. So that's the shape cylinder. So we're going to look for cylinder over here. Shape cylinder. If you don't have it, that's a starter content. So if you add the starter content pack, then you can use the cylinder. And for the material, we want to use the glow material that we created earlier. So the spline glow, make sure you enter that over here as well. Let me see, for the spline, that should be good to go. So after we created the arc, we want to play our impact FX at the end. So we can simply move our grenade target. So we can grab our grenade impact location, drag it in here, and we want to set the world location. Set world location. Make sure that we connect it up to the completed pin of the for loop. And then we can get the location from the last index. So if we go to our array of outpath positions again, we're going to drag off here. And let's get a copy. And we actually want to get a copy of the last index. So drag off here again and look for last index. Plug that one in. And then we can use that as the new location for our impact FX. So area of effect FX actually. And then we can enable teleport, so we don't have to check for collision and things like that. It's just an FX playing. Okay, so this should be the update event for our grenade, and that should be pretty much good to go. But we're not done yet, obviously. We need to set up some inputs, play montage and things like that. So let's set up the rest. So let's tackle the montage first. And because we want to play a montage, we need a multicast event. So we're going to right click and create a custom event. And the first one is going to be server grenade montage. So for this one, we want to make sure that it's set to run on server. And then we're going to create a second event, so custom event. And this is our multicast grenade montage. So for this one, we want to set the event to a multicast event. And then over here, we can actually play the montage. So let's drag off here and play montage. Select the upper one over here. So then we can grab our mesh or the character mesh, plug it into the skeletal mesh component, and we want to play our grenade additive montage. So make sure you select the additive one. The other one is in the pack by default. So we're going to grab the additive one that we created ourselves. And then for the grenade event, for the server event, we want to make sure that we call our multicast. So we're going to call the multicast create montage grenade montage. Thank you. So those are the events we need to play our montage. And then we need an event for our inputs. So let's do that one next. Let's go to an empty spot and we need to look for our input event. Throw grenade. So that's the action event. And if we want to press the button, we want to set a variable. So we're going to create a new boolean and we're going to call this one is throwing grenade. Oh, freaking. Is throwing grenade. There we go. So this is simply a single boolean. And over here, we want to drag it in. If we press the button, we're going to set it to true. Then we want to call our grenade setup trace event. So setup trace. And call this one. And we actually want to call this event on tick. And because a lot of you people don't like using on tick, we're going to use a timer. So we're going to set a timer by function name, drag off here. And we're actually also using a timer because it's a lot easier to start and stop the event. So set timer by function name. For the function name, you simply want to type in the name of the event that we created over here. So the grenade update trace, I'm simply going to copy and paste it to take any spelling errors into account. So over here, timer by function name, simply paste that into the function name. And then for the time, we want to get the world delta seconds. So right click, do get world delta seconds. And we're going to plug that one into the time. And we're going to enable looping, so it's going to loop continuously. We're going to drag off the return value and promote it to a variable, and that's going to be our grenade trace timer. So we have a reference to the actual timer, and we can actually stop it very easily. So this is going to happen locally for the player, because obviously the player that's pressing the button needs to see the path prediction and the other players don't need to see it. So that's what we're doing over here. And after that, we want to add a has authority check. So we want to make sure that all of the stuff behind this check is handled by the server. So let's move it down a little bit. And if we actually have authority, then we want to call an event that we don't have yet. So we're going to get back to this later, because over here we want to increase the velocity for the grenade, but we need to add that. So this should be pretty much good to go. And then we want to go to the released pin. So on releasing the button, we're actually going to throw the grenade. So over here, we want to grab the switch has authority again. And first we're going to plug that in. So we're going to make sure the server handles all of this stuff. So if we are the server, we can simply call our multicast throw grenade. Or the montage, so grenade montage. And if we are a client, we're going to tell the server to do it for us. So let's call the server grenade montage. And then inside of the montage is our animation notify, and on that notify we're going to throw the grenade. So for now we are good to go for these events. And we can set up the actual grenade throwing event. So let's right click, create another custom event, and we're going to call this grenade throw. No, really. So this is going to be a normal event. We're not going to replicate it. This is going to be called from the animation notify. So this will fire on all instances of our character. And we're going to use that. So first of all, we're going to grab a branch and we want to check if we are locally controlled. So drag off the condition is locally controlled. And if we are locally controlled, we need to make sure that we clean up the trace. So we're going to drag in our grenade trace timer, drag off here, and we're going to clear and invalidate the timer. So this will simply stop the timer from running. And then we also want to stop the trace. So we're going to drag off and call our grenade stop trace. So this needs to happen for the local player. And then we actually want to throw the grenade, and that's going to be handled by the server. So we're going to drag in both of these branches, plug them in, and then we're going to grab an is server and plug it into the condition. And if we are the server, we want to spawn an actor at location. So spawn actor from class, I'm sorry, not at location. So for the class, we can simply select our PP grenade, the one that we just created. And for the spawn transform, we can grab our grenade location component and get the transform. So we want to get the world transform. So make sure that you actually get the correct one and plug it into the spawn actor. And now we can make sure that we set some stuff on the grenade. So we're going to drag off the return value, and we actually want to set the controller. So set controller, plug it in. And in this case, we can simply grab it from our variables. So we can grab our shooter player controller and simply plug that in over here. That should work fine. And we also actually want to set the team ID on the grenade, but we forgot to change or actually add that variable. So let's close down this blueprint for now and let's go to the grenade blueprint. And in here, we're going to add a new variable, and this is going to be the owner team ID. So we can use this for our team deathmatch games later. And we're going to set this integer, compile and save it. And then if we go back to our hero base, we can drag off the grenade here again. And we can set our owner team ID. And then we can grab the team ID from our variables. That should be in here somewhere. So we can simply drag it in and plug it in. So now the grenade knows his owner and also the team that the owner belongs to. And then we want to drag off the grenade again. And we're going to call our multicast set velocity event. Plug it in over here. And for the velocity, we want to make sure that we use the same velocity that we used for our path prediction. Otherwise, it's not going to work, obviously. So for now, we can go up to our predict projectile path and simply grab these vectors that we created over here, copy and paste them down below. So that's for the grenade velocity. Paste them and plug them into the multicast. And that should actually take care of throwing the grenade. And I accidentally moved my notes. Okay, so I'm back. So that was throwing the grenade. Now we also need to make sure that we have an event for our radial damage. So as I mentioned before, this is the first time we're using the built-in damage from Unreal. And we actually have our own events that will take care of handling the damage. So if we right click over here and we're going to look for the radial damage event radial damage, and we simply want to hook it up to our take PvP damage event. So if we look into our own functions over here, we can drag in our take PvP damage, simply plug it in like this. So the damage received is going to be the damage amount. The hit result is the hit info structure, so we can plug that in directly as well. For the attacker, we actually want to drag off instigated by over here, and we want to get the controlled pawn. So the instigated by returns the controller that we plugged in, and we need to get the pawn. So let's get the controlled pawn from this controller. And then we can plug that into the attacker. And we can get the team ID from our grenade. And our grenade we actually set as the damage causer. So if we drag off the damage causer, we can cast to our BP grenade. And from our BP grenade, we can actually get our team ID. So let's convert this one to a pure cast. And then from the grenade, I'm going to drag off and get the owner team ID. And plug that into the attacker team ID. So this will connect the radial damage to our own PvP damage event without too much hassle. So let me double check my notes and see how far we are. So I think we're pretty close. So all we need to do right now is go inside of our animation blueprint and make sure that our notify actually do something. So let's open our animation blueprint, and inside of the event graph we want to add an animation notify event. So let's right click, go to animation notify event, and we simply want to select our grenade throw event or notify, and then we can grab the character reference that we already have inside of our animation blueprint and simply call our grenade throw event. So this will make sure that the grenade gets thrown when the notify fires. So compile and save it, and I think we are ready for our first test. So let's see if all of this is actually working. I'm simply going to start a single player for now. And let's see, let's grab a free-for-all game so we don't have all kinds of enemies running at us. And let's see what happens if we press the G key. So right now we have a fixed velocity, so the arc is not going to increase. So that's actually normal. And as you can see, when I'm moving around, this is actually working pretty good. And now if I release the button, he will throw the grenade and it will actually launch at the correct position. So that seems to be working well. So right at the ankle there, so that's good to go. So the only thing that looks kind of weird over here is the spline mesh. So we may have meshed up something with the scale of the spline mesh. And we get a few errors, but this is actually nothing to do with our grenade. So this is Unreal being kind of weird. It says I have simulate physics enabled on the arrow of my player start. So this is kind of useless information we don't actually worry about. So if we take a look at our BP hero character, so let me double check over here. We're setting the start and the end scale, so that should pretty much work. So I'm not really sure why it doesn't look like it should. Let me double check and I'll be back. So I'm not really sure what's wrong with the spline mesh at the moment. So I'm going to look into that and we're going to fix it in the next video. So we still have a lot to do. We want to add damage to our AI. We want to add it to the HUD. We want to make our velocity increase. So we actually need to chop this up in 2 videos. It's going to take a bit too much time if we want to do it in 1 video. But for now, this is actually working. And we can actually damage ourselves as well. So we have a pretty good start for our grenade, and in the next video we're going to finish it. Hope you enjoyed the video and hope it didn't really become too much of a hassle for me recording the video from 2 monitors instead of 3 and things got messy and stuff like that. So I hope it wasn't too bad. Thanks for watching. If you did like it, please consider leaving a like and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later guys. Bye bye.